Hello, my name is Julian Sindel. I'm Director of Cadenza Transport Consulting, and we're going to be talking about creating social value with railways. Now, I don't normally talk about my qualifications very much, but I just list them there, partly to illustrate that I'm an engineer, and engineers don't normally talk about social value stuff, but I hope as we go through this that you'll see how important social value is to what we do on the railways. So we're going to cover a few things. Firstly, why do we do railways as our job? Why do we build them? Why do we design them? Why do we get interested by them? I want to look a little bit about what the policy context is for social value, and then run through some case studies that I've been involved with. And then finally, some thoughts on how we might do social value. So firstly, well, why do we do railways? And there's many reasons that those of us who have done the MSc course might conclude. It might be that we think that we do railways because we like delivering big, complex railways to time and budget, and of course quality, remembering the project manager's project triangle. Maybe it's because we realise we want to improve the capacity or the resilience of the railway system. Or maybe it's something a little bit bigger, to provide an integrated transport solution. Or frankly, maybe we just do what we do on railways because we find it interesting. And all of those are perfectly good reasons for getting involved with railways. But I want to suggest that maybe another one would be because they can play a transformative role in the lives of real people and the state of the local and indeed national economy. And at this current time, this is a particularly important thing to be thinking about. Many years ago, when I was working on site, I was working with a guy who was from Dagenham, in Dagenham, which is in just outside London to the east. And he said, if you live in Dagenham and don't have a car, you don't have a job. And it really brought it home to me how vital public transport is in the real day-to-day lives of individuals. And what he was saying here was that actually you need to have a car, or there is basically no means of earning money. And that was a vicious spiral, because it meant many people didn't have a car, so they couldn't get to a job, so they couldn't earn enough money to get themselves out of the poverty that they were in. So these things are important. But what is social value? Now, I want to take you to this definition from Social Value UK, which sets itself up as the professional body for those who are involved in social value. And they describe it like this: social value is the quantification, so it's actual measuring things to metrics of the relative importance that people place on the changes they experience in their lives. So it's quite a broad definition and probably quite difficult to get our heads around. I certainly find it difficult to understand what's really meant by that. So I hope you don't mind, but I've come up with my own version of what I see as the role of social value. And I put it like this: improving individual lives and the local economy. So there's two things there: there's individuals and there's the wider society. And for me, it's about enabling access for people to real jobs and jobs to people. In other words, employers can get the staff that they need, and individuals can get to new job opportunities and real jobs, real meaningful work. Sometimes it's about enabling access to learning opportunities, and this is important from the point of view of people being able to get to university or to their local college more easily, or even perhaps a better college than they might otherwise be able to go to. In part, it's about building pride in the local community, because communities are quite often the glue that holds society together. And perhaps it's to do with inspiring that next generation, particularly in terms of railways. We always need new people coming through, and perhaps part of what we can do is inspire people into thinking about railways, thinking about engineering, thinking about bigger kinds of job opportunities than they might otherwise have been able to think about. So what are the outcomes of investing in social value? Well, I think there's a few things here. Firstly is improved social mobility, giving people better employment prospects, and particularly for those who are disadvantaged around the country. I worked on a project a little while ago where the person who was going to hopefully become the next MP was talking to me at a public consultation, and she was really having a go at me because not because she didn't want us to do the railway project, but quite the opposite. She was complaining that it wasn't going to be there quickly enough. And she said, we have young people here, they have nothing to do, they have no prospects. We need this railway, we need it now. Why are you waiting? Improved social justice means that people can get better access to community facilities, particularly if they don't have a car or access to other public transport systems. And that can be health, I mentioned education, social groups, that can be religious buildings, churches, mosques, and improved access to the environment, being able to get out and go for a long walk or enjoy some of the local amenities that they might otherwise not be able to get to. And I think there's probably improved community through increased local engagement, which in turn drives lower violence and vandalism. So those are nice things, but what about the policy? Because actually a lot of these things won't happen unless there are external drivers forcing project managers, engineers, and others to actually think about this and build it into what they do, because of course it costs them money to think about these things and to plan and to put measures in place to boost social value. And so this is where policies and standards can really help in forcing people to take this whole thing seriously. So let's start big. The International Social Value Policy, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, draw out a number of areas that are linked very closely with social value. So I've mentioned quality education before, decent work, I've termed it meaningful work, and driving economic growth, building industry, innovation and infrastructure, and creating sustainable cities and communities. A sustainable community is not one where everybody ends up leaving the community because they can't get any work, or because there's nothing to do, or they can't go anywhere, or no companies are going to invest. Bringing it down a little bit to the UK, there's a UK National Social Value Policy. It's been in place since 2012, and it's an act to require public authorities to have regard to the economic, social and environmental well-being in connection with public services contracts. Okay, so that's quite a mouthful, but it links in with the next one around considering pre-procurement how social, economic, environmental well-being could be improved when buying goods and services. So this leads towards procurement requirements that put clauses in saying you need to be thinking about how you as a contractor, a bidding contractor, are going to invest in the community that we have here, so that the project benefits the community directly. And that can be something as simple as making sure that local firms are used wherever possible, that there are local apprentices employed within the company teams. And local authorities have the freedom under the social value policy to determine what kind of social value would best serve the local communities. The RSSB, Railway Safety and Standards Board, has developed a common social impact framework, and you can see the link there. And it covers a whole range of things, and I won't read them all, but I mentioned earlier local and sustainable procurement, social inclusion, and diversity and inclusion. There's a whole range there. It's a very good, comprehensive document. And then within the UK, of course, there's Network Rail. If you work on Network Rail, there are the environment and social minimum requirements for projects. That's 015, current issue version 8. And it talks about the purpose of this is to increase the social value created by maximising opportunities for inclusive design, considerate construction and socio-economic growth. In other words, we have to think outside just the little box of the railway bit that we're designing. And it's mandatory for all construction and design works carried out by Network Rail and its contractors as part of anything run through grid. So let's go a bit further into that. Some of the social performance requirements include being a caring neighbour. Yes, okay, so that's in relation to contractors, thinking about the people that they're working alongside. But there are a number of other initiatives there that in many ways are not difficult, but they just require a bit of thought, a bit of extra thought beyond simply doing the design, building the railway. And so we're going to move on to other social value frameworks. There's often regional policies, depending on where you are. There are local policies and plans. The organisation that is procuring might well have an organisation policy. That's particularly the case with third-party projects working on the railway, so not Network Rail projects, but local authorities, for example. And there may well be local enterprise partnership policies that you can tap into and really start to engage the local business community in that way. So let's look at a couple of case studies. Here's one that I was working on a little while ago, where there's a major town, there's a railway running to it, and there's a planned residential development, quite a large one, with a site safeguarded for a number of possible uses. It could be a college, it could be a hospital, it could be a business centre, or all of those things. And this was one where the organisation that was developing it was really thinking about how they could improve the environmental credentials of the development, and they were looking at solar panels on the roofs and grey water recycling and lots of green trees in and around the area, and ways in which they might make it difficult for people just to drive everywhere. But it was interesting that when it came to thinking about perhaps a railway, they were much less certain. They were concerned about the cost. But in particular, so there's a sort of social element there, and you can see this very clearly in the Garden Villages and Garden Towns article, which is a very good read, and it basically demonstrates that many developments around the UK today are perhaps inadvertently building into their design a need to have a car, making it very difficult to use public transport to get in and around the development. And but I think it's actually kind of worse than that sometimes. So here's this planned hospital or college or business centre, and there was resistance to connecting it to the railway. There was a railway just a mile or so away, and there was resistance to connecting to the railway. And the position I sort of suggested was actually this is about a social justice thing, because if it's a hospital, for example, and people can't get there except by car, and then have to pay huge fees and car parking fees, you're actually making it very, very difficult for those who are unwell or their relatives to come and visit them to go to the hospital. And actually, because statistically speaking, poorer people tend to be less well, you are inadvertently directly disadvantaging poorer people by not creating decent public transport links. And this is somewhere where the railway could easily help and easily be linked to this proposed site. And whether it's a hospital or a college or a business centre, if people can't get there by public transport and make use of the railway that's alongside, then we're automatically excluding certain people. We're making it too difficult for some people to get the care, to get the training, to get the opportunities that they really need. So here's another case study that I was working on a little while ago, and it's a major station that they wanted to redevelop, and in the context of some of the development for this large station, I was able to unlock a large area that is currently railway sidings, move the sidings out, and to create a huge area right in the middle of this town, about 5.5 football pitches worth of space. And that gives a huge opportunity for the complete transformational development of that town, such that they could really do anything they wanted in there. They could have a huge retail centre. They could have a very large business centre. They could create an innovation hub and a sort of educational specialist centre. Any of these things will serve to draw in different people and create different opportunities for local people and people in the surrounding area that they just don't have now, and really put the town on the map and improve the local social well-being, improve the local economic opportunities for people in that town as it attracts further investment in. So just by doing a railway project and thinking a little bit wider than simply how do I fit all these little bits of station here, by thinking a bit broader than that, and by sort of seeing opportunities to move things around quite radically, what we're hopefully going to be doing is opening up a new chapter in the life of this town, and potentially boosting people's opportunities for hundreds of thousands of people over the next few years. So it's very exciting, and that's social value for me, just from being a railway engineer. Another project I'm working on at the moment is called the Northumberland Line. It runs from Newcastle Central up a little bit on the East Coast Main Line, and then followed this little route off to the side on what was known as the Ashington, Blythe and Tyne line up to Ashington. And this is a project where we are taking a freight railway. It's currently used for freight, and we're putting 6 new stations onto the line, and putting new passenger services on. And the objective here is specifically to stimulate and grow the local economy. And when I'm up there visiting, it is quite apparent to me that there are a lot of people for whom this will have a completely transformative effect on their lives. And it's an enormous privilege, really, to be able to try and help these communities who for 2 generations have not had any kind of passenger train service, see the young children have the potential to access jobs, for other major organisations to come in and invest in the region. And really, when you look at the demographics of this area, what you find is it looks a bit like a camel hump, because you have young people up to about the age of 20, maybe early 20s, and then it drops right off until there's very, very few people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then just as you start getting into the mid to late 50s, it rises up again into the 60s and 70s. So what we're seeing there is that there is a whole generation, if not 2, that has just disappeared from the region. And it certainly seems fairly obvious that is really because there are no local opportunities for jobs, and it's very, very difficult to get 2 jobs. It's difficult enough just getting to Newcastle Central, let alone anywhere else. So people move, and so it sort of sucks the life out of the community. So I'm very hopeful that over the next few years, as we deliver this particular project, we will see a huge change in people's behaviours, where they feel able to stay and contribute to the community they've grown up in, and still to access decent jobs. And part of what we're doing, part of what I've been doing here, is developing 3 community engagement plans. One is an arts community engagement plan, one's an academic community engagement plan, and the other one is a business community engagement plan. So just very briefly, the arts community engagement plan is looking at things like creating an open source history project, and then capturing that history project, which is all going to be around the railway and its community along the Ashington, Blyth Tyne route, and to really kind of take that knowledge and interviews that we obtain and turn it into a walking, cycling and sculpture trail along the route. And the idea of that is that not only will it help build a sense of pride in the railway and its history and its rootedness in the local society, but it'll also get people involved in active physical activity, and we might even go as far as encouraging people to do a once a year charity walk along the route, and people can do just station to station, or they can do station to 3 stations if they're feeling particularly fit, or even the whole lot if they want to cycle it. This is about sort of tapping into and engaging the interest of a different bunch of people to the traditional engineers who might well have an interest in this. It's about thinking a bit broader and engaging a different part of the community. The academic community engagement plan is also about stimulating people to think about engineering and railways as possible careers, but more than that, it's about really opening up the minds of the young people there to opportunities to work locally, but also further afield, using the railway as their means of getting to work. And so that includes things like getting local railway apprentices and making use of them at all stages of this project. But it also includes PhD research. So if you are an MSc student or a PhD student, do get in touch. We would love to hear from you and hear how you might make use of the data that we are generating as we develop this project for your study. And it doesn't just have to be railways and engineering. It could be social indicators, it could be educational indicators, it could be economic indicators. All these sorts of things are wide open for us to engage with the academic community. And related to that also is about training young people, many of whom may never have travelled on a train in their lives, about how to get on a train, how to buy a ticket, how to behave more safely at level crossings. There are 23 level crossings on this route, and so far they have maybe 3 or 4 freight trains a day, but soon they're going to have a passenger service every half hour in each direction. So there's a complete change in people's appreciation of the railway that normally they would just walk across without even thinking when they get to a level crossing. Now they're going to have their wits about them. So there's an educational element there as well in terms of safety. And then there's the business community engagement plan that we are developing so that we can do a number of things. One is to help the local businesses seize the opportunity that comes from having a new market on their doorstep, people suddenly turning up to railway stations that haven't been there. And so to do that, what we're looking at doing is running a series of business surgeries for local businesses to help them think through how they might vary what product they offer, what time they offer their product, so that they can catch the commuter market and tailor what they offer to those commuters. And perhaps to think about advertising more widely and say, well, you can come to our shop and we're 1 minute walk away from the station. Catch the train. Pubs and clubs will have the opportunity to reach a wider audience and say, well, come and visit us and you can just catch the train home. So there's that kind of element about helping local businesses to get the best out of what we're offering as a railway. It's also about attracting other businesses to invest in the area, and there's a study at the moment looking at strategic opportunities for economic development in terms of how we can major on key areas. So, for example, up near Blyth, there's a sort of international knowledge centre for the supply and development and design and construction of wind farms. So, we can build on these sorts of things and help other supporting supply chain businesses invest in the area, knowing that not only can their customers and their staff get to where they work, they can also actually take advantage of new markets and think a bit wider, and they can access their own clients by train as well. So there's those 3 community engagement plans that we've been looking into developing, and we're well underway in getting those going. But these are all things that are not what a traditional railway engineer gets involved with, and yet it's incredibly exciting to see how we can take this railway and make it do what it's supposed to do to boost the local economy, and doing that in a way that is far more than simply just saying, well, we put some stations on a bit of track, over to you. So being more proactive in how we engage with the local communities, different parts of the local community, will help build a sense of pride in the railway and a real desire to use it and to take advantage of what it can offer them. So how can we do things differently as people who work in the railway industry? Well, I think when we are developing new projects, I think we can focus on the people who will benefit and understand what their needs are, and recognise those who are not going to benefit, who are going to be impacted. We do need to take time to listen to local communities, to hear what they want and engage them in that process. And there's also a need, just to, as engineers, to listen to the wider team, the environmental consultants, the legal planning and consent consultants, and so forth, just to make sure that we are tapping into a broader range of needs. I think we need to take social value seriously and not just see it as something fluffy and woolly and nice to have. I think we have to encourage our clients to invest real time and money in maximising the value of the asset that they're paying for. And we need to, as soon as we can, be identifying clear deliverables and measurable outcomes. And you'll remember that quote from Social Value UK was looking at the quantification of social value. And that's important because the people with the purse strings, the politicians as well, they need to be able to point to real, specific, measurable, quantifiable changes as a result. And then I think finally, we in the railway industry, particularly in the UK, really must find ways of driving down the cost of what we do. It's no surprise that half of new developments since 2015 next to the railway have no connection with the railway. And I think it's simply because we make it so difficult for developers to even consider connecting up to the railway. If they have a choice between creating a bit of a bus network that's connected to the local highway infrastructure, it's dead easy because they're going to connect to the railway anyway. And they can open up for a bus service. It doesn't cost them very much. But when we turn around to them as a railway industry and say, you can have a railway and it's going to cost you £20 million, well, all of a sudden, that becomes something quite difficult to sell. So we've got to drive down costs. And I think only when we will do, will we earn a place at the table and really start to influence society, influence local economies, and frankly, do what we as railway engineers really should be doing, which is making a difference. I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope it's been stimulating and made you think about what you do a little bit differently. If you've got any further questions, there are my details. I'd love to hear from you. Have a good day.